My name is Gay Bradshaw, and I am a researcher. I've been working in animal trauma for over 15 years. I have a doctorate degree in ecology and a second doctorate degree in psychology. I was working initially with captive and wild elephants, free-living elephants, and I discovered post-traumatic stress disorder in elephants in 2005. And subsequent to that, I've been working with a number of different species. I've worked with parrots. I am now beginning to work with grizzly bears, domesticated animals, and other wildlife who've experienced severe violence and trauma. Transspecies psychology was the name of a field that I established in recognition that science is based on a huge volume of data that shows that all animals, including humans, share the same components of the brain processes and structures that govern feelings, the way we think and experience consciousness. So transspecies psychology is just recognizing explicitly that we all share the same ability and capacity to feel and to think. And this means all humans and all animals. Generally speaking, animals were not recognized as having emotions. That is to say, they didn't feel. For a long, long time, they were not even regarded as having the capacity to feel pain. So over the years, there's been an accumulation of scientific studies from all different areas in ethology, animal behavior, biomedical studies, etc., that have recognized and have accumulated data and theory that show that animals have emotions. And animals also have cognitive abilities. That is, they're able to think in ways that we used to think were exclusively human. Now, this really isn't a surprise because Charles Darwin, who wrote over 150 years ago, recognized that other animals felt and had emotions. Animals are very much like us in the sense they experience the whole spectrum, you can say the whole rainbow of emotions and feelings that we do. They grieve when a loved one, whether it's another one of their species or even another human, passes or is ill. They have memories. They remember where they hide things. They remember if they've met someone. So they have all the same kinds of abilities that we do. And they are very empathetic. They show a distress or great love for their animals, even if it's a crow and a cat, or a hippopotamus and a tortoise, a pair of animals that we would not think would even get along in any way whatsoever. So one of the things that's coming out is the very, very strong bonds that animals have with each other and how important that is for them both physically and emotionally and psychologically. Well, first of all, it's really important to understand that the institution of captivity, meaning someone who is confined against their will, is very unnatural. The science and also our own sensibility shows that this is a very stressful situation. As a result of being in confinement or captivity, there are all sorts of different kinds of behaviors, which really are expressions of what's happening inside mentally and emotionally. The best thing to do is just picture ourselves, what it's like to be all of a sudden not able to express or have any kind of control over our life. Our food, our water, our relationships are all restricted. All of the stress that's associated with confinement is sort of directed inside, and that's directed inside the mind and also directed inside the body. Well, confinement is unnatural. Dogs are related to wolves, and you don't even have to go back that far in evolution. They are meant to run, they are meant to move, they are meant to interact, they are social beings. You contrast that with life within a crate, within a confined space. That differential, meaning free access to food, free access to companionship, a sense of self-control, etc. When those are removed, which they are within a crate or in confinement, that differential is the magnitude of the stress that they're undergoing. So when you're thinking about keeping an individual locked up for most of their lives, it is devastating. It is devastating. And what is particularly pernicious about captivity is a lot of times we don't see it. We don't see it. Why? Because one, captivity is normalized. A lot of these things like keeping animals in captivity, in cages, in crates, that's culturally conditioned. That's something that we've been seeing for tens of, if not hundreds of years. So one is our glasses are fogged because of it's culturally normative. The other is the fact of that you can't always see the terrible effects that are happening inside, again, physiologically and psychologically. And so there's a tendency to say, well, that individual is doing fine. But what the reality is terrible devastation inside.
Life in the kennel is a happy life for the Greyhounds. You got to keep those Greyhounds happy and content in order for them to perform at their best. And they enjoy that, that lifestyle in the racing kennel.
People take their dogs home and put them in a crate, and they like that crate.
How do you know they like the crate?
Because they go right in it. If you left a dog loose in a room and you had a crate in there and had the door open for that crate, I guarantee you that dog would not go lay in the middle of the floor in that room. He would go to that crate that was open and go get in that crate. I guarantee it.
I believe that it's a real misconception to say that someone likes captivity. For one, it's the only thing that they've really known. So we will go back to whatever's familiar. The other is the fact of that domesticated animals are under the threat of the human. So they are under the control. So they do what their keeper tells them to do. There's fear built in. It's not a very healthy relationship in the sense of that they are totally dependent on the human. And that's all they know. And so they're told to go in and they will go in. That doesn't mean that they're enjoying it. That's what their job is. So we have to understand that even the relationship may be very close. And someone says, I love my dog or I love my cat. It's conditional on what the human wants. And the cat or the dog or the person is obliged to be in that relationship because everything about their life depends on that person. It's a conditional relationship. And that conditional relationship is always a veiled threat because that person who is in charge of the dog or the cat can take the food away, can take the freedom away, and can even kill that individual. In the case of racing greyhounds who are confined the majority of their lives, the majority of the day, and that have only very short periods of time in which they're quote-unquote able to be free. And again, we have to say that's a very short period of time and it's a very restricted area. So I can only speculate. Of course it's a relief to get out of a confined area where you can't stretch and be free and run and do all those things. It's a relief. And yet, from the human perspective, talking to human prisoners, there's always the threat of knowing you have to go back into the confinement. So I'd say, as a psychologist, I would say, yes, it's a temporary relief, but at the same time, it's very short-lived because they know they have to immediately return into the cage. And one can speculate then, again, from accounts from humans, of what that's like. Back in the cage again, back in confinement. So there's a potential re-traumatization, a sense of potential freedom, and then going back in. Sense of freedom and going back in. So when that happens over and over and over, it can be a very depressing kind of experience. So we have to understand and really appreciate what captivity and confinement does. It creates a lack of confidence, a lack of what we call internal competence, unsure how to navigate and negotiate in the world because they don't know how to. They haven't. Everything has been extremely restricted. So going back to the crate is at least familiar. It's familiar, it's known. And so that is something we really need to appreciate is how much fear these individuals live with every day. Well, I think anyone who sees a greyhound running says that they love to run. It's freedom. They love to run and be alive and joyful. They're social. They should be with other dogs and running and jumping and loving things.
A lot of the urban people are unrealistic. I mean, if you look at a poodle with the ribbons and the toes painted and all that, and then you ask them, they say, well, why does a dog even run? Well, they don't understand that these dogs love to run. It's their passion to run. And they make good quality pets. And this is something I like to get out there. They make the pets they are because they are genetically bred to be superior athletes, to have blood types, the highest hemoglobin levels of any animal in the world just about. They use them as blood donors because they're that good. You will not have that when you breed them for conformation and for pets. The reason they make good pets is because they're intelligent. They have to run on their own. They're not forced to run. They have to run. If they run over dogs, that's a dumb dog. He has to be smart enough to know how to run around dogs. So we are breeding for genetic superior intelligence, conformation, all those things. And the only way you do that is to perform. When and if the greyhound industry does not exist, your quality of pets, of greyhound pets, will go. Hip dysplasia, every breed that's won the Westminster Dog Show quite often have temperament problems, behavioral problems, conformation problems, physical problems, because they're not bred. I love, as I said earlier, to see a dog do what he's bred to do and what he loves to do.
In greyhound racing, the dogs have a goal in life. They have something to look forward to. If you stand at a starting box, you can see them wagging their tails, wanting to compete, wanting to race. You could take one that has had no training and probably put them around the track because that's what they're bred to do, and they love it.
Well, it's important to keep in mind that where we're living and how we're living today is radically different than even 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200, 500 years ago, when all of these institutions like racing, like zoos, etc., were running and well accepted. Now captivity and cultural institutions of captivity, such as racing, such as zoos, are really under question in the public. For example, in India, they have banned elephants in zoos. That's huge. In Costa Rica, they've closed their national zoo. No more wildlife in captivity. In Spain, they have given great apes, that is chimpanzees and all other apes, full rights. We are living in a very different psychological, political, and environmental landscape. Wildlife is going extinct all over. People now realize that their dog and their cat has a mind and a heart just like them and has feelings. They're treating them, quote unquote, just the same that they would themselves or their own children. So they're just the same. As they say, we're kin under skin. And that is also a testimony of what they called animal models, why animals are used in place of humans for doing psychological experiments, psychiatric experiments, and other kinds of procedures that would be prohibited for humans. Now, even prominent neuroscientists recently have made a public statement saying that all animals, including the octopus, which is an invertebrate, have the same capacity that we do for thinking, feeling, and consciousness. That's huge. That's a complete reversal than what has been thought of over the last thousands of years. The thing is that the science, it's basically, in fact, transspecies psychology is, I'm not taking credit, all I did was put a label on what was already there. But by doing that, what that's done is, that is the scientific backbone for the animal rights movement. It's the intellectual and the scientific backbone. It's the rationale. So you don't need to appeal to ethics. You don't need to appeal to animal rights or even emotional things. It's right there in the science. It's right there in the science. And so from that perspective, there really isn't any argument other than putting into place what we know and translating what we know scientifically into policy and law. And the animal rights movement is no longer that. The animal rights movement is merely an expression of, again, what we know scientifically.
The problem is the way that this industry has been operating for a long time. And the dogs, once they reach a certain point, become a commodity. And if there are injuries on the track or if the animals can't be adopted out, then, that's just the cost of doing business. And we have been concerned about it for an awfully long time. And I know that the industry has made some adjustments. And I know that there are people within the industry, especially some of the breeders, who care about the dogs. And they're fascinated by them. I think the industry as a whole, though, has not been operating in a way that is safe and good for the dogs. And there's not a lifelong protection offered for these animals.
It isn't about how we care for the dogs. It isn't about whether the dogs are happy. It isn't about anything like that. It's about how much money that they're getting from people making them feel sorry for the dogs when they don't need to be. Eventually they will get exposed. And eventually the public will help us because they'll see how we are caring for the dogs, and they'll like us better. So they about went to the end of what they can do with some of their distortion of what we're doing.
The controversy and the issues that are concerning the Greyhound community are really a microcosm of what is happening all over the world and other aspects of our society. Right now we're experiencing something that humanity has not experienced, at least in our known history, and that is this huge scientific and social revolution. It's bigger than anything that Galileo or even Copernicus did, and the reason why is because every single aspect of our culture and society, our social contracts, have been based on human-animal differencing, that humans are fundamentally different than other animals. And now, not only our own intuition, but science has shown and documents that we're all the same. They have all the capacities to have all the things that we have: dreams, aspirations, love, security, friendships, curiosity, memory, all of those things that gives us the richness in our life and that makes us who we are. Dogs have the same thing. So what we're faced now is, as a society and as individuals, how to recreate the social contract, a social contract, an ethic that includes not just other people with different ethnic backgrounds, different cultures, but other species. But this is why it's so big, is that now we're appreciating and understanding that literally we are connected to each other, literally. This is what quantum physics is. Quantum physics is talking about that. Contemporary science, no matter where you look at it, is saying we are so deeply connected. So this is why the understanding and final admittance that all animals, including humans, are basically the same, that scientific revelation is having huge psychological, political, economic, and social waves, tsunamis. Well, it's true. It's a huge revolution.